Hello everyone, this is Clay with DigiFactors Animation and welcome to another Muvizu tutorial. Today's tutorial I decided to show you guys, or gals, how to make a helicopter with animated propellers to simulate flight. And to do this, we're going to start off with our choice of 3D modeling software. I use 3D Milkshake for this. Reason why, it's easy, cheap, and a fast workflow. And I just put together a helicopter. So let me open up that helicopter in 3D Milkshake right here. And as you can see, if you have a model that you load up, and if that model has textures with alpha in it and transparency, it's by default, it's going to add that in there. But you can fix that by going to the materials tab. And underneath the materials options, you have this default button right here. So click on that and change it to ignore alpha. That way you can pretty much make out your helicopter. Now if you notice, the helicopter doesn't have a blade on the top, because I left that out because we're going to make a blade so we can animate it. Okay, now let's do that right now by clicking on the models tab, and let's click on the planes button to create a plane. Now let's go to the top view, which is right here, and then let's drag a square over the helicopter like so. And then on the side view, let's bring it up. Now that plane isn't quite centered, but the only way we're going to be able to see how centered we got it, or if we got it right dead in the center, is by adding the texture. Now I have a texture that I whipped up for the blade in paint.net, and I already got it saved. So we need to open that up in a program called Spriter. I use Spriter to animate a lot of my textures. And I'll add a download link to this in the description. So with that said, let's start a new project. Now do keep in mind that whenever you start a new project, it'll ask you to connect to the root folder that you have all your contents to. And I have that. So let's click on OK, and we'll click on project and then chopper. So that's my project folder. That's my root folder. Click on that. And then over here on the right hierarchy, you can see there's a list of everything in that project folder, as you can see. Now, we're not wanting the texture to the helicopter itself. We need the texture to the blade. So before we drag that blade into the work area, we need to center the pivot. So double click on that. That'll bring up the default pivot application. And we're going to click on the center pivot tool. And as you can see, the pivot's right here. So we want to put it right in the center of that blade, just like so. Once you do that, click OK. Now, let's drag that propeller to the work area, and we'll put it right in the center. And once I let go, you'll see the pivot tool, which is right here. That way you can just drag it and it'll spin. Now if we didn't center that pivot, when you rotate it, it'll be way off center and everything. So that was the idea of adding the pivot into the center. Okay, now let's animate this to make it spin. Okay, go down here to the timeline. Now let's go right in the middle between 0 and 100. We're going to add a keyframe there. In order to add a keyframe, all you have to do is drag it to anywhere in the timeline and then move a certain part of your texture. So in this case, the propeller. So let's spin it like so. Okay, now let's go to the 100. I'll back up where I can see my pivot tool. Okay, and then let's spin it to the next. Right on there. Okay, now let's go in between 100 and 200. Spin it again. Then to the 200. Just keep repeating the same step over and over until you get the whole timeline filled with the keyframes that you need. So in between 2 and 300, and then go to the 300, spin it around. So now let's go between 3 and 4. So now to the 400. Just keep repeating the same steps over and over until you get it all the way down to the end of the timeline. Once we get this done, we're going to export it into image sequence. And then we're going to take those image sequence in Virtual Dub and we're going to turn it into a video. Okay. Just about there to the end. The reason why we're doing it all the way to the end of the timeline because we don't want no skips or jerks in it. So a couple more to do. I know you're probably saying, why don't you just go ahead and do one at the beginning of the timeline and then one at the end and then spin it around. Believe me, I tried it and it doesn't work. You have to do it this way. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the timeline. Now let's push play and see how that works. Perfect. Now it's moving kind of fast because I think I have it set for 30 frame rates per second. Let's see. Stop it. Let's see. Export animation to PNG. Let's see. So what did I do with that? Oh no 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 no. I'm sorry. We do that in the we'll do that in the virtual dub. But I think that works pretty good. But yeah, the frame rate I think I got it set for 30. Yeah, 30. So now that looks good. So let's export this. Well, we got to create a folder. So I'm going to create a folder for. Let me get rid of that because we're doing this over with the blade. So I want to create a new folder and we'll call it blade. Yeah. Now, now let's export that. We're going to export it. Let's see. Separate numbers of images files. So we're going to keep it on that selection and then we're going to export and then export it to that folder we just made. And then we're going to name it blade. And this will create image sequence of the whole animation. Like so. Now that's done. Let me minimize Spriter. Okay, and here's the folder with all of our image sequence. And I saved them in PNG. Okay. Now, the next thing is to do is open up VirtualDub. Now, I'll uh, provide a link to the web page, the website for a download, or I may just even give you a direct link from my cloud service where I have it stored. So let's open up VirtualDub. Okay. Now, go to the file and then open up video file. Now navigate to that folder that we just made with all those blades in it. Now we're only going to select the very first one because VirtualDub will import every one of them image sequence by default. So let's open it up and there we go. So let's push play. Alright, stop. Now for this excuse me. Sorry about that. I went down the wrong way. Okay, so in VirtualDub, we need to set the depth color. We go to video, and then we go to depth color, and we're going to set it on auto select, and then click on same as. Okay, and click OK. Then we go back again. We click on see what was it? Let's see. We click on compression. And then we're going to select the first one. So it's already selected by default. So we're going to keep that. That is for transparency and everything. So let's click it on that. Alright. Now, let's see. The frame rate. Let's go back to video and go to frame rate. We're going to change frame rate to 30. Let's see. 30. And then click OK. Now let's play that, see how fast it goes. Now we're getting some progress there. Now push stop. Now let's see. Now I'm not going to add any filters because there's no need to add any kind of other filters to this, so we're just going to leave it alone. So we're going to export this as AVI, okay? And I'm going to export it into my project folder with the chopper, which is, let's see, here, and project, and then chopper. And we're going to name that blade animation. Okay, and then we'll save it. And then it'll export it. Now let's minimize VirtualDub. And then let's go to our projects folder. Now I have a video texture and the plane texture. So let's play that. Ah, that looks good. So let's close that out. Now let's go back to 3D Milkshake where our helicopter is. Now let's just add the plane texture, the one that's not animated. So we'll go to the Materials tab and we're going to click New. Alright, and then on the first nine, click on that and navigate to this one right here. This is the default texture that we're going to use. Now double click on it to add that texture. Now you can see it's way off. So all we have to do is go to the Models tab and click on Move. And move it to where that blade is right in the center to where we need it. So just kind of like get a little close here. Get it to where I think that's good right there. Okay, now we got it centered, but the blade needs to be a little bigger. I want the blades to come out to close to the tail fin. So let's click on the scale button and let's get a little closer and let's just slowly drag it to where it's almost touching. Well, it's not going to really touch, so it's almost touching. So that looks good. Now let's make sure we still got it centered. Centered looks good. Okay, now that is done. Now let's export this whole helicopter as ASE into our projects folder, which I already made one because I was practicing. So I already made one right there. So we're going to click on that and overwrite it. If not, just if you don't have it there, just save a new one. So, and with the ASE export, keep it the same. Don't change it. Just click OK. Now our helicopter is done, and all it needs to be is exported into Muvizu. So let me open up Muvizu. Well, I already have it open. And let's move this sunlight right about here. Alright, now let's export it. Import it, import it. And once you import it, make sure you select, you should be set on this right here. But we're going to select not opacity, because that would make the whole thing transparent. Opacity mask, not really much of nothing. Just, yeah. And what we need is opacity and opacity mask. That's the one we want. That is the combination of no transparency and transparency together. So whatever's transparent, you won't see, but what's not, you will see. I guess that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so once you're done, make sure it's set on double-sided and click OK. And there we go. Now, make sure we got, let me move this camera out of the way. Now to make sure that we got that helicopter the size that we need it, I always use a character of Muvizu to help me size things up with. So before I size it up, let me click on physics and then uncheck the could be stood on. Now let's go to the scale and let's scale the helicopter. Whoops. For some reason it's not selected as linked. So let's link it. Oh, wait a minute. Let me undo. Like that. Now link it together. Now let's just size that helicopter up. You want to make it big enough to where you think two characters can fit inside. And I think that's good. It's always important to size it up with your character. You don't want something being smaller or way bigger. You want it bigger than the character, not smaller or the same size as the character. Okay, now as you can see, the blade has a transparent background, so you don't see nothing there but the blade itself. Now, let's add that video texture to the helicopter to make that blade spin. So we're going to go to Properties and click on Image 2, which is the blade. Click on that, and then let's import to where we have that animation that we made, the video. Click on that and then Open. And now it's going to say, attempting to import a very large file. Proceed. Go ahead and push yes. And there you go. Now it does have a little bit of stop in there in the propeller animation. So it must be something I forgot to do or I didn't do. But anyway, you can see it. Watch it. See right there where it stops. It's about a half a second. Right there. I must have missed a frame when I started making the keyframes in the timeline. Okay. Now we have a spinning blade. Now, show you a trick. Let's put the helicopter in keyframe mode. Just right click, go to direct, and then movement. Okay, and then we're going to switch it to prepare, and we're going to go to keyframe. Switch back to direct. And just add that keyframe right at the very beginning of the timeline. Whoops. Now let's stretch that timeline out right there. Let's move the beginning of the timeline past that keyframe we just made. Alright. Now the helicopter is in animation mode. So let's right click on the helicopter. Okay. And let's go to this image here and let's just go back to the regular default that we have made. Keep it like that. Okay. Then I'm going to show you a little trick. I'm going to take the character right here and we're going to make him walk like he's going inside of the helicopter. So go to direct and just, let's do character movement. Click on regular walk. Now let's animate him going to the helicopter. Right there. So we'll move that to the beginning there and let's kind of move the slider to a point to where he'll disappear right about there. We'll use a cue point. And then right here, we're going to animate the character to disappear. So right click, direct, and then go to properties. Switch to prepare. And we're going to keep it image. We're going to, no, I'm sorry, we're going to click on the image and switch to visible. Click not animated and switch it to keyframe. Then switch to direct. Right at that cue point, add a keyframe and then uncheck the current. Whoops. My bad, I did the wrong thing. Let's do that again. So let's delete that. We need to uh, do the character. I accidentally, I guess because I was over the helicopter. Now let's do the character. So we're going to right click on the character, direct properties. Okay, switch to prepare. So teeth, image, we want visible. Click on keyframe, back to switch to direct, and then add that add that keyframe at that cue point. Click add keyframe and then uncheck the current. Now that's what we want. Sorry about that before. I didn't know I didn't realize I clicked the wrong thing. Okay. And then at that point, we'll move it up a little bit past that. And right about here, we're going to add another cue point. Now, in the helicopter, we're going to go to direct properties. And then we're going to switch to prepare. We're going to switch to image 2, which is the helicopter blade, the blade, the propeller. And then we're going to switch to keyframe. Okay, and we'll switch to direct, add a keyframe at that cue point, and then we're going to click on that image. Then we'll import the animated blade. There we go. Okay, whoops. Let's undo that. Didn't mean to move it. Alright. Now, he got into the helicopter. He walked over to the helicopter, got in, started it up. Now let's wait right about here. Wait a minute, right about here. Now let's right click on the helicopter, switch to direct and movement. Now, click keyframe, move it down the timeline a little bit, add another keyframe, and then lift it up. Okay, whoops, undo. Now, move the slider down the timeline a little bit more, and let's add a keyframe, and then let's have that helicopter take off. And we'll have him fly off into the distance. Make sure we straighten the helicopter up. And he'll fly off into the distance. Now let's adjust our timeline. Now let's go back to the beginning of the timeline. And let's adjust the camera. About like that. And we're going to right click on the camera and we're going to go to direct movement. We're going to animate the camera to follow the helicopter. Okay, so switch to prepare and then the keyframe and switch back to direct. Now, let's move the timeline. Time slider. And it starts it up. Okay, and right about here, I'm going to add a cue point. I'll take that back. We'll put it over here. We'll say right about here. Oh, wait a minute. Go back down. Let me delete that. Trying to figure out what happened. Okay, alright. So he walks in, starts it up, and then we'll put a cue point there. Cue point there, and then we'll take the camera, we'll lift it up, and we'll look like this. Okay, now let's go down a little further. Add a keyframe. Turn the camera. Back it up a little bit. We'll turn it right about like that. And just keep following the helicopter. And off into infinity that he goes. Now, let's go back to the beginning. And let's enlarge our camera view. And let's play it to see how it looks. Starts it up, lifts off, and off he goes. Well, that's it. That's how you make a helicopter with animated propellers, and how to animate the copter and have the camera follow. I hope this tutorial helped you, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. So stay tuned for another tutorial, and I'll see you soon. Have a blessed day.